Tyranny of the interagency consensus, Elizabeth Warren's healthcare debacle, the Katie Hill lies, threats about outing the whistleblower, and Zuckerberg shoots down Sorkin. That and more coming up on the Buck Sexton Show. Welcome to the Buck Sexton Show, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. Great to have a chance to address you all across the country and in some cases all around the world. We have a lot of stuff to get to for a Friday, so I feel like shouldn't stand too much on ceremony and just get right to it. I do want to note, though, that one of my predictions came true. In fact, many of my predictions come true, but this one in particular I'm proud of. I told you that as soon as everybody learned about Conan the Barbarian, as we are calling him, Conan the hero dog, there would be a surge in interest in Belgian Malinois, the breed of dog that Conan happens to be one of. And now ABC News had a story this morning. I remember I told you that people are going to want to start getting the Belgian Malinois. It's going to become very trendy. ABC predicted this morning thousands now want the breed of hero dog involved in the al-Baghdadi raid. But experts warn that they are too much for most people. Who told you, folks? Who told you? Not only that they were too much for most people, but that there would be this surge in interest. So as beautiful and incredible as Belgian Malinois and even German Shepherds, Dutch Shepherds, these different working dog breeds are, they are not something that you want to just pick up and bring home to the kids. You're going to have your hands more than full. Important safety tip from the Freedom Hut today. All right, let's get to the tyranny of the interagency consensus. Fantastic piece today from my friend Mark Hemingway, husband of Molly Hemingway. Mark is a great writer in his own right over at The Federalist. And his piece is called Donald Trump versus the Interagency Consensus. And this is a particularly important time for this because as part of all of this impeachment stuff you see going on, brouhaha, which is a fun word to say, this impeachment fracas, ruckus, I think these are all words that we could use. You are seeing people come forward who can't help but let it be known that while they're government employees, they think that the bosses within the government that are elected by the people to oversee the federal bureaucracy, the machinery of the day-to-day of the federal government, that the people who work inside the machinery think that they're not just executing on orders, they're really there to drive things. And that the elected officials come and go, but the bureaucracy is forever. This is troubling stuff. And when you add that to the admission more recently of the former, I think he was the former acting CIA director, John McLaughlin, when he was being asked by a CBS, one of the liberal CBS journos, about Trump's impeachment. Here is what, now I know people will take this in different ways. I'll tell you how I'm going to take it, but here is what the former CIA director, John McLaughlin, who is a guy from inside the bureaucracy for a very long time, here's how he talks about the deep state. Play 4, please.
You'd have to agree that now
totally.
The impeachment inquiry is underway, sparked by a complaint from someone within the intelligence community. It feeds the president's concern and often used term about a deep state being there to take him out.
Thank God for the deep state. I mean, I think, everyone here has seen this progression of diplomats and intelligence officers and White House people trooping up to Capitol Hill right now and saying, these are people who are doing their duty, who are responding to a higher call. Think about it for a minute. With all of the people who knew what was going on here, it took an intelligence officer to step forward and say something about it, which was the trigger that then unleashed everything else. Now, why does that happen? What I tell American people why that happens is this is the institution in the U.S. government that, with all of its flaws, and it makes mistakes, is institutionally committed to objectivity and to telling the truth.
I will tell you, as somebody who used to work in the CIA, that that's a very rosy picture of what the institutional commitment of that organization or any part of the intelligence bureaucracy, what the day-to-day really is something quite different from that. There's a lot of complexity involved here. There are concerns about access. How do you shape policymaker beliefs without actually telling policymakers what to do? These are the back and forths that you'll hear about from people who've actually worked in the intelligence community. But I'm also going to tell you that there are a lot of people who work in the federal government who really think that, first of all, they're overwhelmingly, personally, politically Democrats, and in some cases, really leftists. They've gone into government work because they believe in the power of government to do good things, and they also think that if we're going to have this big shiny toy that is the federal government, they want to be in control of it, and they want it to do the things that they are ideologically aligned with it doing. That the mission is not top down from the president as the head of the executive branch. The mission is what the people inside the walls of whatever this federal agency is think it should be, and they give lip service to the guy has always been a guy up to date, lip service to the guy who is giving the orders. Yeah, sure, we'll do what you say, but we're also going to be working to do things differently in our own way. And in no presidency has this been more clear than the presidency of Donald Trump. I think it's also worth noting that we were initially told that talk of a deep state was a conspiracy theory. That if you spoke of bureaucrats inside the federal government who thought they had a mission apart from what the actual mission from the commander-in-chief was, you were engaged in some misdirection, fantasy, you were misled. You must have been a consumer of fake news. And then we found out about McCabe and Comey and Page and Strzok and Yates and Brennan and Clapper and the top echelon of federal law enforcement and the intelligence community under the Obama administration, none of whom are supposed to be explicitly political. And now, beyond any reasonable doubt, we know that they were deeply political, objected to Trump not just on specific issues, but in general, objected to his elevation to the role of commander-in-chief, and believed that they had a duty to thwart his desires, his directives, his mission, his promise to the American people. They never really accepted that he won the election, and therefore the will of the American people expressed through that election should be pursued. There should be efforts made to execute upon that plan, not the plan of the bureaucrats who had been there for a very long time in D.C. And this is where we get to the consensus views of the interagency. What does that really mean? That came up recently in the testimony of Vindman. And this was from his written statement. Now, you would find that that's a troubling thing for someone to use as a justification for objection to the President of the United States as a policy matter in Ukraine. The views of the interagency, this, I can tell you, is also really a misnomer. What ends up happening in the intelligence community is that there will be an expression of one point of view from one agency that is the best approximation of what a majority of the senior people in that organization, leveraging some of the expertise of the younger people, think of an issue. And then it will often be, as part of the interagency process, balanced with the views of other agencies, many of whom have different equities, have different mission sets and tools at their disposal and expertise. And at the end, they kind of just blurt out this product or this briefing or this decision on a specific issue to the President of the United States that represents a so-called consensus. But by the time it gets to that level, it's often so watered down as to be largely meaningless, and also momentum carries the day. What does CIA think now? What does DIA or NSA or any of these agencies, what do they think now? Chances are it's kind of similar to whatever they thought a year ago or 5 years ago or 10 years ago about the issue, unless there's been some massive change. Right? They tend to have their own customs and ways of doing things, ways of thinking about things, institutional biases about different problem sets around the world. What do we think of talking to North Korea? What do we think of engaging China in a trade war? What do we think of counterterrorism? I mean, all across the board. And I know because I sat in meetings where important issues were discussed in the intelligence community, and we're trying to find some consensus-ish position, and there's really no such thing. There's really no such thing. It doesn't. The consensus on Ukraine? Well, there was no consensus on Ukraine policy because the Obama administration refused to give them lethal aid. Then the Trump administration came in and did give them lethal aid. So that was a change from the commander-in-chief. Were there a lot of complaints before about Obama's unwillingness to do what was necessary to really help the Ukrainians? No, of course not. And then we get to what the real consensus of the interagency, and what we find is the consensus of the deep state. It's anti-Trump. That was the only thing that they all really could agree on. That is what was motivating so much of what we saw in terms of the actions of these senior bureaucrats to frustrate the president's decision-making, and beyond that, to destroy the president, to undermine the president, to work with reporters and the Democratic Party and whomever, to work with foreigners in the case of Christopher Steele, assembling the dossier and using Russian or Ukrainian or whatever sources, and laundering that DNC paid-for document through our own intelligence community, and then starting a FISA warrant on Carter Page, a full field investigation on George Papadopoulos. This stuff is insane. They didn't just oppose in principle. They opposed by taking it upon themselves to use the power within the government that they had to wage a political war, a political vendetta against Donald Trump, because the consensus of the deep state was and is that Donald Trump is unfit, unacceptable, and did not really win the 2016 election. So they are under no obligation. We often hear the Democrats now talking about how Trump swore an oath. He has to uphold and defend the Constitution. Well, guess what? Part of that Constitution establishes President Trump as the commander-in-chief of the executive branch and of the military. And they don't get to, in the deep state, just decide that they wash that away. They push that aside, and their mission then becomes whatever they say it is. They're giving their own orders now. You know, the bureaucracy has become self-aware, kind of like Skynet in the Terminator movies, and that didn't end well for us. The only consensus opinion that they're really sure of is that they have to do everything they can to stop Donald Trump. They used to say there was no deep state. Then they said, okay, fine, there are a few people in the deep state. Now they're saying, thank God for the deep state. And it's like we're supposed to pretend that we didn't know this was coming all along, and they haven't been lying to us all along.
First, they insisted that the president is a Russian agent. Then they claimed he's a money launderer and a tax cheat and a fraudulent businessman. And now they've decided they don't like the way he talks to foreign leaders. But they have no evidence and no argument to support impeachment. All they have is the unconditional cooperation of the media and their advance their preposterous narrative.
What is more likely? To repeat one of my favorite challenges here on the show, what's more likely, that President Trump is at the same time, according to Democrats, guilty of all of these horrible offenses? And Congressman Nunes there laid out a number of them. Some have gone away as a result of finding out more facts. Others have been stretched out now, and they've added to it, or they've moved the goalpost. They found some way to keep the allegation alive. But what is more likely, that Trump is the idiot that the left says he is, but also able to do all these things and get away with them, or that Democrats have abandoned reason, fairness, and decency and are just throwing every allegation they can against a president that they just cannot stand? They hate this guy. They hate him because of what his assent means about the way they view the world. They hate him because it means that there's someone who will challenge some of the, not just political, but some of the cultural norms out there that have affected politicians, especially on the right, for a long time, that he'll take the fight right to the media. They can't stand this guy. And the only way that they could stop being so crazy about him would be to come to grips with all the lies that they've told so far, and they won't do that. And the people that have believed this, the people that have been spoon-fed the nonsense from CNN and from MSNBC, those who've been lied to by the New York Times, the Washington Post, all these expectations about the Mueller probe ending the Trump presidency, freeing us all from the long, dark night of Trumpness. Turns out that that wasn't true, but the people that believed it to be true can't be told that. They have to be told, don't worry, it's coming just around the corner. And that's where Nancy Pelosi and all the Democrats come in. That's where the people who are part of, very much at the top of the establishment, and who often conflate credentials with credibility or credentials with competence. And just because you're the boss of something, you're the head of something, you're the speaker of something, doesn't mean that you're a good person, a knowledgeable person, or a wise person. The elites don't like that, though. They don't like the challenge of somebody coming forward to say, hey, I know you've all made fun of me, you thought I was a joke. Here I am, the people have empowered me, and I'm now, as Donald Trump, pointing fingers at people and saying, well, who are you exactly? Why should you be in this elevated position? Why should you be able to walk around so smug and dictatorial at the same time? Based on what? A lot of people in the media, a lot of Democrats in academia, in the legal profession, in Hollywood, they don't have good answers for that. And it unsettles them. It really bothers them at a core level. And so that's why Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats, as I've been saying all along, and you listen to the show, you know, I try not to be that guy who says, I predict the future. A lot of people do this on radio, and it's annoying to me because they just tell you about their winners. They don't tell you about their losers. But I tend to be right. Hopefully that's one of the reasons why you listen to the show. I've always been saying Nancy Pelosi, she's going to make sure that this president is impeached. That's stretching back for 2 years now. She's going to impeach this president. Why? Because of the emotional, psychological need of the Democratic Party and the people who run it to lash out at Trump, to have yet another moment of not my president.
This is not any cause for any glee or comfort. This is something that is very solemn, that is something prayerful, and that we had to gather so much information to take us to this next step.
I rise in strong support, but I do not take any pleasure in the events that have made this process necessary. I rise in strong support of the resolution, but I do so with an understanding that the task before us is a solemn one. How each member of this chamber approaches the vote this morning and the days and weeks ahead may be the most important service as members of Congress we will ever pay to the country and Constitution that we all love and have pledged to defend.
Oh, these Democrats are so, it's just, they really don't want to do this to Trump. It's just so serious, and they know how serious it is, and there's no joy. No, there's no schadenfreude at Trump's misfortune. There's no sense of, ha-ha, we're pulling off another scam against this guy because he keeps beating us and we can't accept the reality of what's going on in the country under a Trump presidency. We have to keep creating this fake world of Trump is destroying everything and everybody. Does anyone believe these idiots? Pelosi and Schiff and all the rest of them. Oh, no, we take no joy in this whatsoever. Really? Why are they doing it? It's preposterous. Schiff ran around for 2 years saying that there was evidence of Trump colluding with Russia. Schiff ran around promising his constituents and all Democrats and leftists across the country that President Trump's day would come when finally he could no longer hide from his treason. Remember, folks, that is what they were accusing this president of. Is there any reflection that comes from being wrong for 2 years, Madam Schiff? Of course not. He served his purpose. If nothing else, and the Democrats won't admit this publicly, The Mueller probe, in a sense, worked. It obstructed the president, slowed down his administration, kept good people from going to work in this administration. The Democrats have already managed to rob Trump of some of the powers of his office by running around with these insane, deceptive, destructive narratives. But then to have the temerity, to have the brazenness to sit there and act like they don't want to do this. Oh, I don't want to do this. Donald Trump is forcing my hand. It's weak stuff. We all know exactly what's going on here. You had the House vote yesterday, 232 to 196, to approve the resolution setting out rules for an impeachment process. So now there's some rules of the road that they have agreed to in the House. How many Republicans went along with this in whatever we're calling it, this vote to begin an impeachment inquiry that we were told had already begun a couple weeks ago? How many Republicans have defected? 0. This is an entirely partisan vote, which is new in the history of impeachments. Republicans had turned on and were turning on Nixon, and some Democrats went along with the Republicans in the impeachment proceedings against Bill Clinton. So this strictly party line vote shows you exactly what's going on here. This is just a power play by the Democrats seeking to undo an election that they did not like in advance of, just barely, another election of a president that they say is so stupid and so dangerous that it should be obvious the American people wouldn't reelect him. Here's what we all know. They are terrified that this president will get reelected. Why shouldn't they be? Look at the jobs numbers today. Look at what's going on in the country. Oh, we were told if Trump moved troops out of that part of Syria, there'd be genocide and ISIS would rebound and a huge terrorist army would sweep across. Or we'd find out that Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi was dead a week later, thanks to our special operators, some good work by folks in the national security realm at the direction of the President of the United States. The economy's still doing very well. The biggest problem now is there's so little in the way of unemployment. There's so little for Democrats to sink their teeth into as criticism against Trump that they just have to keep repeating these crazy narratives, and we have to sit here and spend time shooting down the insanity. Impeaching the president for what? What's the purpose of this inquiry? How many of you even heard about the NSC staffer who came forward and said that as soon as he heard, this was yesterday, when he heard the initial Trump phone call with Zelensky, that he thought there was nothing illegal, there's nothing wrong with it? What law was broken? And at the end of all this, you have to remember the aid was not cut off. The investigation to Biden did not occur. So we're going to criminalize a conversation between two heads of state that resulted in no action, nothing done, and that he was completely within his constitutional rights to do in the first place. This is what it is. If the Democrats did not have their just quisling little media toadies in their pockets, they would never be able to try to pull this off. It's so flimsy. There's no there. There's just nothing to speak of. That's why they work so hard at pushing stories that any person who spends any time digging into says, is this it? This is really what's happening? There are some Republicans who, it does seem to me, have an understanding of what is really going on here. Representative Cheney, by the way, has some fire. Representative McCarthy has quite a lot to say about this, too. Producer Mark, please do 5 and 6 for me, if you would, sir.
This is a process that has been fundamentally tainted. The president has had no rights inside these hearings. His counsel has not been able to be present. So for them now to claim that they're suddenly going to open the process up, which, by the way, this resolution does not do. The resolution says that they're going to continue doing what they want to do. It gives authority for open hearings, but they cannot go back and fix what is a fundamentally tainted and unfair record.
Elections have consequences. Our fellow Americans use their vote to choose who will work for them. So I ask you all a simple question, especially to my colleagues. Is that what is happening here today? Are we gathered in these final moments before we depart for a week to fund our government, to pay our troops? Are we gathered today to prove a new trade deal? Or are we gathered to debate the critical national security issues regarding China or Iran? Well, that answer would be unanimously no. We are not working for the American people. Those items would resemble the achievements of a productive Congress, a Congress that truly works for the people.
What is this Congress doing? With the Democrats in the majority, it is working in the deeply undemocratic fashion that we currently see underway, where they're trying to undo an election from 2016. That's it. We have the American people lined up and ready in almost exactly 12 months. We'll be able to decide what they really think of a Trump presidency. But Democrats seek to short-circuit this by putting forward a process that could, in theory, remove the president from office. And they want to do this based on something that we've all heard about and that anyone who is looking at honestly says does not rise to the level of a high crime or misdemeanor. If you don't like it, vote against Trump. That's why we have elections. If you think that it was unfair in some way, but not illegal, there is a process for that. Vote. Democrats pretend to care so much about voting. They say if only they can get more people to vote, of course they would win. They're always the majority, even when the votes come in short of what they need for power. Pelosi in particular, I wonder when I could meet somebody who would tell me that Nancy Pelosi is someone that you could feel good about supporting as a powerful politician. I know a lot of Democrats, and they all seem to understand that Nancy Pelosi serves a role, but she'll just say whatever. She'll say anything. Whatever she has to say at any point in time, that is what Nancy Pelosi will do. You had an example of that last night when she was on the Colbert. Oh, no, it's not the Colbert Report anymore. That was the old show, right? Truthiness. That was actually a much better show. Now he does the Late Show in New York, which I can't imagine how many nights in a row can someone just do the same tired Trump jokes before people get tired. But the answer is that audience, the leftists, people live in New York, L.A., San Francisco, D.C., never get tired of Trump jokes. Doesn't matter if they're funny, doesn't matter if they've heard them before, just keep it coming. Anti-Trumpism is a compulsion for these people. It's like they have an addiction to people trashing Trump from whatever platform they can. But one thing that you'll never have on the right, you'll never have in conservatism, at least not any time in the near future. Maybe things will change dramatically in my lifetime, although I doubt it. When Democrat politicians go on these late night shows, the whole point of it is to massage some of the propaganda, to let the Democrats have their say, and also have somebody who's cool and has a lot of cultural resonance and a big platform, a lot of people watching like Colbert does. Make that Democrat just seem cool. You know, they do this. They'll have CNN anchors on too, who are overwhelmingly unimpressive dorks. But they'll have them on and make them seem cool. You know, yeah. When they're done with that show, like then they're going to go hang out at a big fancy cocktail party on the Upper West Side or something with all the other very cool people and media and intelligentsia and all the rest of it. There's a cultural blessing, although I don't think they like the term blessing. There's a cultural blessing that occurs on that show for Democrats that never extends to Republicans. Never extends to them. An example was last night when you had Pelosi on with Colbert. And unfortunately, a lot of people still get their news from these stupid, hackneyed late-night shows. But here's what she said about, I mean, you guys all know, at least those who've listened to me for a long time, I have some rules, right? What's one of my rules about politicians? Whenever they say it's for the children, you know they're pretty much lying to you, right? Whenever they say it's for the children, they're trying to manipulate your emotions, and they're being shameless. Oh, look at this, Nancy Pelosi. What does she think about what's going on right now? Play 22.
Because they said, what advice would you give people who want to run for office? And I told them they have to have their vision and their knowledge and their strategic thinking and their connection to the aspirations of their constituents. But I said, this is not for the faint of heart. So if you want to go into the arena, you have to be prepared to take a punch. But you also have to be prepared to throw a punch for the children. For the children.
Throw a punch for the children. Madam Speaker, thank you so much for being here on this momentous day. Good luck to the Constitution.
There we are.
Throw a punch for the children, everybody. That's what they're doing in this impeachment hearing. They're throwing punches for the kids. It's for the kids, you see. That's why they're doing all this stuff. Not so that Nancy Pelosi's fancy liberal friends in San Francisco and New York and D.C. can think that she's doing a good job. Give her a high five. I don't know if she does high fives, but whatever it is, at the next cocktail party, which are real things. And people say, oh, stop talking about liberal cocktail parties. No, they exist. Trust me. I don't get invited to them, but I know they exist. I have friends who go to them. This is just shameful. This whole thing is shameful. And the acrimony that you're going to see as a result of it is only going to get worse. There's no effort here to restore norms, to bring us back to a place where at least we could count on Democrats to play by some of the rules or think that some of the rules are important, even when the rules are not favorable to what a Democrat or the Democrat majority wants. That's what it means to have a principle. That's what it means to respect the system. They speak about respect for the system. They speak about respect for the Constitution, which is laughable, by the way, to anybody who remembers what was going on with Democrats during the 8 years of the Obama presidency. And Democrats went forward with a law that regulates inactivity, and then a 5-4 decision in the Supreme Court keeps that grossly unconstitutional legislation alive. And they want to tell us about the Constitution and about individual rights and liberty. I mean, it's a joke. It's ridiculous. And unfortunately, it's deeply unfunny. We're going to see this now with very few surprises. It's just a shouting match. The left on one side, the Democrats on one side, Republicans on the other. Whatever they can do that hurts the president is what they will do. Everything else is a distant concern for them, including throwing a punch for the children.
Founding fathers understood that a leader might take hold of the Oval Office who would sacrifice the national security, who would fail to defend the Constitution, who would place his personal or political interests above the interests of the country. They understood that might happen. And they provided a mechanism to deal with it, and that mechanism is called impeachment.
Adam Schiff invoking the Founding Fathers. I don't want to throw up because you would hear it on radio and you would see it on the Pluto channel, which so that would be bad. But I did feel my stomach turn a little bit. This guy, the one who lied to the American people for 2 years, saying the president was a traitor, folks, working with Russia, betraying the United States of America. And now it's, he puts his interest above U.S. national security interests. I have a question for Adam Schiff. Who determines U.S. national security interests in Ukraine? President of the United States. They run into some problems here. Anybody who understands the way our system of government is really built quickly figures out that they're just making this stuff up. They have no idea what they're really saying. It's all just blah, blah, Constitution, blah, blah, our democracy. Trump is bad. Throw Trump out of office. All the rest of it is just noise. It's dressing up a flimsy case, which is what they currently have against the president. I'm annoyed that we have to spend as much time as we do as a country going into an election year when there are some big things to talk about, like Medicare for all, Elizabeth Warren. We'll get to that. Don't worry. That's coming up. When we should be having very serious discussions about things that will affect you. That will be the difference between you sitting in a waiting room and finding out that you can see the doctor you want when you want, or you sitting in a waiting room and being told, sorry, it's going to be 9 months. I know your arm really hurts and maybe you need surgery, but Elizabeth Warren's plan doesn't allow you to see a specialist that quickly because we're overwhelmed. But don't you feel good because illegal aliens now have health care that you're paying for? That's in your future if these Democrats win. Instead of talking about that, though. It's all impeachment, Trump treason, lies, lies, and more lies from the Democrats. I suppose we should not be surprised.